Okay, so everybody, today we're speaking about a very important topic, and that is the situation that's going on in Afghanistan. So I have a guest, Jawid Nabizada, who's actually from Afghanistan, but he's been living in Slovakia for almost 30 plus years. So he's technically also half Slovak, I would say. So he has a very good perspective on what's going on there. And I'm sure he's gonna give us a lot of insights about the situation that is really unbiased, that will be unbiased because he doesn't represent any media or anything like that. So thank you, Jawid, for joining us today.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to speak about this. Yeah,
definitely. So maybe we can start with your background. So I've mentioned that you live in Slovakia, but you're originally from Afghanistan. So maybe you can tell us, when did you come to Slovakia, and why did you maybe leave Afghanistan? Because it was in the 80s. And I guess this is how we can start.
Right. Well, it started years ago. First time, basically, when I came to Slovakia was year 1987, and that was basically the sole purpose was to come here to study in Slovakia in the technical college, technical school, and finish it and go back home, travel back to Afghanistan. And basically that was kind of part of the former regime in Slovakia. I mean, they had some kind of mutual agreement between Afghanistan and at that time the government of Afghanistan and this government in Czechoslovakia. They had some kind of mutual agreement that students could come in Slovakia or in Czech Republic or in other countries to study and gain some experience and go back. So I was part of that group of guys and had the chance to come here. Yeah.
And so can you tell us what was the situation in the 87 in Afghanistan? Because I think it was Soviet invasion at that time, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe you can tell us more.
Yes, basically the time I came to Slovakia or former Czechoslovakia, there was in Afghanistan a kind of socialist government in the rule, and they were ruling the country by some kind of sort of secularistic style of government, and basically at that time the Russian soldiers of the Russian military was in Afghanistan. So when I moved or when I came to Slovakia, then a year later they basically started moving out from Afghanistan. So that was actually the time, almost at the end of their presence in Afghanistan, when I came here to Czechoslovakia, and later on, obviously in 89, the whole thing also finished here and also back in Soviet republics and all other places. So the communism of the whole system basically sort of collapsed, and so then finishing the invasion of Afghanistan was kind of the trigger of collapsing the whole system at that time. So, and the reason why when they came to Afghanistan and started the whole thing, like invaded Afghanistan, was that back in 1979 or 78, there was a coup, and there was a military coup in Afghanistan, and leftist parties in at that time when in Afghanistan they started having some kind of movements against this president at that time. How was the system? It was called republic, but that was sort of secular system. And so these guys, these leftist parties, started having some problems and with this president, and started rebelling, and some resistance, and then this coup started, and then the president got murdered, and then they called it later on that was the revolution, like in this, the date in Afghanistan was 7th of the month Saur, so that was called the revolution. And then basically this revolution triggered the whole resistance in the entire country, and slowly the movements of the Islamic groups and this so-called Mujahideen started, and then they started attacking Russian military and attacking this Afghan local government military, and started the resistance started getting bigger and bigger and grown, and it became almost all over country resistance. So a lot of groups, a lot of Islamic groups, basically, how to say, they started receiving help and aid from especially US and Western at that time, of like the other side of this bipolar world. So they started receiving a lot of help, military help, and money, and material supports, and moral supports, and all this kind of stuff. So that was basically 8 or 9 years.
Let me ask you a question about the coup. So there was a leftist, like let's say, revolution. Was it organized? Was it supported by Russians at that time? Like, and then the resistance, basically.
I believe Russians that not directly supported, but they were kind of behind the whole activities of the movement. But this leftist or the revolutionaries, they basically started the whole idea even far before they started having these close ties with Russia or with Soviet Union at that time.
So they had communistic ideas or secular.
Yeah, okay. For example, they started having these ideas from the Chinese revolution and this kind of stuff. They called themselves this forever fire or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting because you have like 3 main ideas. You have like, at that time, you have like communism, then you have capitalism, and you have like Islam. So
yeah, I mean, that was not strong capitalism. That that time the government, the president was this cousin of the former king, and he was actually raised against his family, and he actually dropped out his government or the kingdom, and he started and he announced the republic, the parliament, and all those kind of stuff. Even though the parliament was before he started all his activities, and he was the chief of the parliament, but again he wanted to have more kind of well, he was not he wanted to kind of bring faster advancement and faster move toward modern society and this kind of stuff. So the king was kind of not very how to say active in that. So that was a kind of a family, I would say, dispute. And then this president gave much more freedom to the political parties. They started having their own agendas. And then there was a lot of demonstration in Kabul. Every party had their own claims and plans and all those kind of stuff. So at that time, these leftists started having more and more the power and gaining the power and more support. And so that was kind of the trigger. They overthrew the president, this government, and they killed this president. They murdered him, obviously, in the palace.
So, and the system at that time, political system in Afghanistan, it's not a monarchy or like democracy, but you have multiple political parties and you have this president. So is it, how would you call this system? Maybe like...
I would say it was not a strict democracy, but it was a kind of a sort of democracy. Monarchy was not anymore in power. Political parties were popping up and rising and getting more and more in power. It was a kind of a sort of parliament system or parliament democracy. I would not call it strong democracy because the president had a veto power and was very strong in the power. So it was not that liberal democracy or liberal democratic system like as we see it now in the West.
Yeah. And maybe a question more about the overall society, because in Afghanistan, it's not, the country maybe is called Afghanistan, but like you have many people living inside the country in different clans or different like small groups with a lot of ethnicities, a lot of family, family members, and they have different ways of life. So can you break down maybe how these people live outside of Kabul, maybe in like villages? What's the life of these normal Afghans like, in these sort of societies, in these like rural areas?
Well, Afghanistan is like a multicultural and multi-ethnical land. A country is not ruled or governed by a kind of a big majority and minorities, but it's more or less collection of several big ethnic groups and then a lot of small ethnic groups, I would say. And of course, there are the largest are Pashtuns at that time, or maybe even now, I'm not sure, I don't know exactly the statistics, but they basically have around sort of 40 to 40 something % of the whole population of the Afghanistan. I mean, just the Afghanistan part of the Pashtuns, not that I don't count the Pakistan part of the Pashtuns. They were like kind of split during the British Empire time. They were split to two parts, Afghanistan part and Pakistani part. And then we have these Tajiks. They are also around 28%, the whole maybe population. And then we have these Uzbeks, Hazaras, which are these offsprings from the Mongolian invasion or Mongolian armies, but they are now quite, I would say, settled in Afghanistan, so consider them our people. They are not foreigners in Afghanistan. And then we have this other groups like Pashai and Turkmeni, Uzbeks, and so on. So like overall, there are like 15 ethnic groups in Afghanistan, I would say, or ethnic societies.
Got it.
And the word Afghanistan is just a kind of coming who knows the history very well, but I'm not sure. But it comes from like it's like kind of artificial name to just glue up the whole country into under one name, that no one has his own privilege to use his own name. It's not Pashtunistan, it's not Tajikistan, it's not this and that, so it's only Afghanistan.
Yeah. And so before we talk about maybe how Taliban started or how even the Islamic resistance started, there was this situation I've read about, I'm not sure if it's correct, but there were these warlords before this happened who like were terrorizing a lot of people.
Well, it started basically during that Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, when this local small resistance group started popping up and kind of grouping, somehow getting grouped to bigger and larger groups. Like we had different groups with under different names, Hizb Islami, Jamaat al-Islami, Junbushe Islam, all this kind of stuff. So most of them had this Islamic name or Islamic sense for them, and some of them that just used the Islamic name just to gain more popularity. But this had these very charismatic leaders that could convince people and kind of have this influence, and these people became even more and more important and stronger. And then once the, I would call it pro-Russian government, or they call themselves socialist government, when they kind of collapsed in Kabul, that was 88, maybe 89. Oh, well, they basically collapsed at the end, then like 91 or 92. But I mean, they started having these turbulences and issues and problems between each other and so on. So it started like 88, 89. And these groups, well, when this government basically was overthrown, these Islamic groups, or they call themselves Mujahideen, or these religious fighters, they started fighting each other to take the control of the government and of the capital city, Kabul. So their leaders, we call it warlords, because they obviously were war leaders. They had no other political agenda except fighting at that time. And then they started fighting each other because of the power. They could not agree. They had some talks to kind of make some agreement between each other, but they did not succeed, and they basically obviously attacked each other. And during that fights, lots of people in Afghanistan died and got killed. The city of Kabul got almost ruined. A lot of cities got ruined, and the whole sweetness of the victory or over Russian military presence in Afghanistan was kind of gone, kind of wiped out in a couple of months, because the people all of a sudden tasted the kind of civil war and fierce fighting, and damages everyone on his own door. So they could not even imagine that, and many people got killed and injured, and there was a lot of atrocities.
So this is not Taliban, right? These are like small groups of
yeah. They were like around 14 or 13 groups fighting each other. So then they kind of slowly, these groups clustered together and made 4 or 5 major groups, which had this kind of common political agenda, and they fought each other, other groups. So there was no Taliban at all. Taliban
Before maybe Taliban, just one thing, so maybe we can understand the Russian government before these groups got and went after them. Was the Russian government good in the eyes of Afghan people, or were they corrupt and kind of
No,
like puppet government style?
It was, I would say, yeah, I mean, it was sort of puppet government, even though there was a lot of patriots who didn't want to be strictly under the kind of Soviet rules. But in fact, that was a puppet government, because it was only doing what was the agenda of this Soviet land. And what the situation was, in fact, this government, because they wanted to have some support from the people, because they wanted obviously be successful, so they wanted to help a lot of people. So they Russians sent a lot of humanitarian aid, food supply, fuel like gasoline, petrol, and all those kind of stuff to Afghanistan, just to keep this government still alive and help also the people, because it was the big cities were under blockade of these military groups, of the resistance group or the Mujahideen. So supply was not an option. So air support was only available, and in fact, the government really tried maximum to feed the people, to do something. Of course, there was some level of corruption, not that level we were witnessed in last years, but it was some sort of corruption, but compared to this was almost minor. And but unfortunately, when the Soviet Union collapsed, this government basically did not have any more support from abroad. There was no military, financial, food supply, nothing. So they could not manage it themselves because of the war and blockades and the civil war. And 3 or maybe 3 years after, Najibullah, the former president, the deceased president, basically announced peace talk, I would call it. And then they asked all these leaders of those groups to come to Kabul and sit together and kind of make a kind of national government that all of them are participating in the government. Of course, they didn't accept it because they considered this Najib as not good Muslim, and they said, no, we were enemies, so we cannot accept you in any government, and so on. Then Najib said, okay, I will hand over the government to the UN officers, and basically you will sit together and you will make a deal between you, and then you will take power and do whatever you want.
United Nations, you mean?
United Nations, exactly. That was in 92, I guess.
So now there's like a civil war, no government, and they try to talk to United Nations. Okay.
Well, obviously, almost entire Afghanistan except Kabul and maybe a part of Mazar Sharif and Herat, and maybe these big cities, was basically taken by these groups or Mujahideen. So government had no rule anymore in these places. Then obviously government was aware that the war cannot continue in this way. There was no money, there was no more supply, no more energy to continue. People were tired of fighting in war. Then basically everybody asked for a peace, and Najibullah started this initiative, asked all those groups to sit together, to come and sit together, and they even asked the international community at that time. However, President Queller, I guess that was he was the chief of the UN. And so basically there was a lot of peace talks, a lot of negotiations everywhere. But at the end, there was no result from that, out of that, and Najib finally handed over the government to the UN, United Nations, and said, I'm not more anymore, basically the president, and you bring all those people together and they have to decide and make pick someone to become a president or make their government whatever they want, and Islamic or whatever. At that time, Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, the chief of the Hizb Islami, Rabbani of the Jamiat al-Islami, Ahmad Shah Massoud, and more, and many more. Those guys, Sayaf, and from the Shia groups as well. So they did not come to any agreement. Then there was a very harsh fight in Kabul, and they almost killed in 2 months like 50,000 people. And they slaughtered almost entire Kabul.
But the groups or the UN
groups, not,
at this stage?
No,
UN
there
is
was
not,
no
okay.
government, there was no this anymore. So it was, everything was dissolved. Everything was actually stopped. So there was no government, no nothing. Just these groups started moving toward Kabul from all sides, directions, to just attack the city, and everyone wanted to be the fastest, to be the first, and to get the control. And then basically everyone took a part of the city and fighting others in the other parts. So during that fight, as I said, a lot of people got killed, and the city got ruined because of rocket attacks almost from everywhere. People got almost slaughtered city. And then at the end, they found that no one can take the control of the entire city. So they sat together and came to an agreement that who will be the president, who will be the prime minister, and what kind of power which will have, and so on. So, but at the same time, a lot of in the all over country started being a lot of kind of turmoils, a lot of attacks, robberies, assaults. People got killed everywhere. There was no, say, control over the situation in the entire country. And in these groups, everyone had their own smaller groups, and these smaller groups everywhere, they started having their own oases, I would say, kingdoms everywhere. So they started doing whatever they pleased, and they start taking over the lands of the people, attacking people, having, basically there was chaos. And during that chaos, people had no chance to flee even the country, because everywhere was fight. It was like almost to be killed or to be dead was much more pleased than to be alive and see this situation for the people. So then a small accident in the south of Afghanistan, in Kandahar, in the south of the Kandahar, I guess, there was a small accident that some warlords, I mean, there's small groups, or I would say some bosses, the mafia bosses. Of course, at that time, these bosses started stealing and looting, basically, and growing poppy for this selling it and so on. So that was a kind of a time of a really very bad time. And then the small accident in the Kandahar, that was one of the bosses was stealing a son of some villager for his own pleasure, like taking sons or some sons of the like small, small boys. There was like kind of their habit to take and go everywhere to which they found some children for them attractive. They either girls or boys, they just took it for their pleasure. So that accident sparked a huge fight in the south of the Kandahar, and that was the time when the Taliban arrived. So these guys were like students in these Islamic schools, especially in the Pakistan, because there was a time when in Pakistan there was maybe hundreds of Islamic schools, and the kids of Afghani refugees were studying there, Quran and Islamic teaching. So then I asked all these people from the schools, hey, please come and help us. Talib means in the student in the term of Islamic teaching, it means a student. So Taliban means students. So these students collected and grouped together under the kind of guidance of some imams at that time in Afghanistan. One of them was Omar. And those started, of course, they captured those leaders, those warlords, they punished them, released these kids like from them, and then they started moving further and further, taking over more and more, and basically killed some of these warlords and took their weapons, and then they had some weapon and they could move more and more and took the power. So then after a couple of weeks, maybe, they took the entire city of Kandahar, the entire province, and they moved further and further. They moved to Herat, they moved to other cities, basically, to other parts of Afghanistan. So obviously they took over the entire Afghanistan. So they took the Kabul, and then they moved to Mazar-e-Sharif. There was a big fight in Mazar-e-Sharif between the warlord of the one who was ruling the city and the Taliban, but the warlord then escaped. The Taliban took over the city, and obviously the whole Afghanistan suddenly stopped. In the whole Afghanistan, the killing and fighting stopped.
Maybe one question, because maybe people who are listening and they are like, well, isn't it the same, Taliban and these warlords? Because like, aren't they both Muslim? But like, so were these warlords, or were they Muslim, or because they weren't practicing Islam correctly? And Taliban was like, I guess, a response to that, in a way. But like, what these warlords, were they like some Afghani?
Well, it's a question. I mean, I cannot blame them, or I cannot judge if they are good or bad Muslims. Only Allah knows the best. But their practices, their acts were not Islamic at all. They were cheating, they were killing people, they were robbing, stealing, corruption, bribery, adultery, and all those kind of acts are not Islamic at all. And they knew that their people under the rules, they are doing that. They did not do any attempts to stop it. And of course, they were doing themselves, and it showed up later. It was then clear to everybody. At that time, people could not believe. The people said, yes, but they were fighting for Islam. They're fighting against like unbelievers, like Russians, and they like kind of kind of pushed them out of Afghanistan. But then when the Taliban took the power, of course, in 96, I guess. Well, Taliban, when they started their own power, they were very unexperienced. They were people directly from Islamic madrasas, from this, schools. They had no political, I would say, or I mean, experience in managing people, in dealing with people. They were just strictly learning Quran and Sunnah, and that was all. So once they, all of a sudden, they felt themselves like these days now, that the whole country is, the people gave up on these groups just fled, and the whole country was on their hands. They had some very strict rulers, I would say, or how to call it, people who were kind of this, I would say, ideological fathers of the Taliban. These guys had very strict, they set up very strict rules, like all men in the country must carry a bird. I mean, they have to have the bird. Also, women must cover themselves totally, like burqa. And even though in Islam there is no obligation for women to cover their face, except for the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Other women are totally free to uncover their faces and hands from wrist and so on. But their rule was so strict that even actually that was more traditions of the Pashtuns of the south of Afghanistan, that their women carried or were carrying this kind of blue burqas, but that was just a cultural thing. So they set it as a rule for the entire country, and obviously other minorities or ethnicities, like ethnic groups like Tajiks, Hazaras, Uzbeks, and so on, they could not agree with, because they were never accustomed with this kind of clothing for the women. That was one thing. The next thing was men, obviously, with birth. But that was also something too strict for people, especially in the cities, in urban areas, where the people were more relaxed in terms of outfit and so on. And then they banned, obviously, women to go outside without any mahram or someone attached from the family, like son, father, husband, or so on, or brother. That was especially they set that rule just because, and at that time, lots of women were attacked and killed or assaulted, even raped in the cities, just by these mujahideen groups. I would say even thousands of women got killed and raped just by those. And so, and they said, okay, women totally must stay at home and cannot go out, because they kind of attract those kind of attacks or those kind of feeling in men, which obviously was not correct, because that was not their fault of the women. If the man did it, even the women had full hijab, there was no such a issue that they had uncovered their body or something like that, that they could attract this kind of attacks. But despite that, that was too, I would say, expensive for the women to kind of handle this kind of situation. They suffered a lot, because sitting at home, especially a lot of men died in the war, and the women had obviously widows, and a lot of women had no man at home to feed the children, to do all the necessity, going out and do all the necessity stuff. So they needed someone. They could not go alone. That was really very hard for them. I understand that they had this suffering very badly. And of course, Taliban admit that they failed, that they did that wrong. And they admit it even now. They say they basically a couple of times repeated that, yes, that what we did was wrong. And we know what is the price, and for what price basically we did it, and we lost the support of the people, of the half of the society almost, just for stupid things. Then of course, Taliban and these things with Al Qaeda and things, this political stuff, we know it, everybody, what happened then later, Osama Bin Laden and this kind of stuff. Of course, then back in 2001, US invaded Afghanistan. I don't want to say what was behind this 1911 attack in New York and all this kind of stuff, Everyone knows what is the truth, but that was a trigger that the US attacked Afghanistan, and
so at that time, Taliban is ruling Afghanistan.
Taliban was ruling Afghanistan, and Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan. Of course, Osama bin Laden had a shelter in Afghanistan because he was kind of he was thrown out from Saudi Arabia, and he found a shelter, refuge in Afghanistan.
But wasn't Osama bin Laden training in the Soviets, actually, the Mujahideens? He was also fighting with them, right?
Yes, Osama bin Laden was part of Peshawar, I guess, Peshawari group. I'm not sure. I'm not very familiar with that history, but he was one of the young Arabs who came from Arabia. He was quite influenced guy. He had money because he was from a rich family. He was very educated, well-mannered, good Muslim at that time. So he came and obviously convinced the groups, and then he kind of took all these Arab fighters that coming at that time to help these Mujahideens fighting Russians. So they took over them, under his own umbrella. At that time, the name was not Al Qaeda. Qaeda, the base. There was no base or no Al Qaeda. It just was a group of, even in Afghanistan, people called them Arabs. That was all. There was no name Al Qaeda or this kind of stuff. Of course, then he was helping these groups like Hizb Islami, Jamiat Islami, and others, with supporting them with money, with weapons, with military hardware, and with other all needed support, like food supply and everything. And of course, he was also participating in all limited number of Arabs fighting in Afghanistan also. Were participating in the fights in Afghanistan, especially when the final fight was in Kabul, in this takeover part. But then they withdrew themselves from the fighting when these groups started beating each other in Afghanistan, these Mujahideens. Then they withdrew themselves. They stayed calm in the southern part of Afghanistan, and just stayed there. Then, of course, when Taliban came, they joined them back, and they helped them to gain the control in Afghanistan.
Got it. And so one thing about the invasion after 2001, because one of the reasons was that they want to extradite Bin Laden or something, like they want to get him, but like there are many other ways to do this without invading. You can do economic sanctions, you can do many things, not military, action. I don't want you to probably, there's many theories. Why did this happen? Was it like the defense budget? There's natural gas, maybe the drug business, or influence overall in the area because there's China and Russia. But like, why do you think Americans were so eager to go to Afghanistan, even though Bin Laden was from Saudi, even the attackers on the plane were from Saudi Arabia, they were not Afghans. And the terrorists.
I think you mentioned already the reasons, but I would say from my perspective, the main reason was the Americans wanted to settle and bring their own military kind of presence in the region and to have a control, because of obviously a lot of reasons. They wanted to control those powers around, and then this drug business, this was all just an excuse, I would say. Of course, these pipelines, energy lines, and this kind of stuff was another reason, because at that time the Caspian Sea was kind of showing up a lot of energy potential, and they wanted to have control over these energy routes. And also for them, Iran was one of these kind of disturbing power. So they wanted to kind of be on the backside of Iran if something happens. In the support of Israel, of course, Israel wanted to, American presence, military presence, especially in the region, was very important for Israel to be confident that they can win every conflict, and so on. So, and the most important thing was they were quite afraid of the rise of Islamic political movement. So for them, Islam was supposed to be something that Muslims just pray at home, go to mosques, and accept whatever is the rule. Like in Saudi Arabia, maybe in some places. I don't blame them for their rule, for the system, but this is what Americans accept from Muslims. If you want to be Muslim, we don't say no, just do it. We will give you a chance to go to mosque, pray whatever, read Quran, but don't say how the society or Sharia or this kind of stuff will be ruling. We will say what should be the system, the political system, the social system in the country.
Yeah, but one thing about this, I think you just kind of mentioned the most important point that many non-Muslims like fear, at least also from my experience. They're not really afraid of like Islam or something. They're like afraid of Sharia, like this is like a scary word. They don't even know what it means. And like, it's very difficult to understand because every group practices, or every country even, have different Sharia laws, you have different fake schools of thoughts and stuff like that. So it's very unclear topic, and nowadays everywhere it's in the news like Sharia, but like, what is Sharia? Like, no one knows what is Sharia actually. It's completely different in Turkey or in Bosnia than it's Afghanistan. Like, so, but one question about the invasion. I know that any invasion, you need to have a UN Security Council approval, like you have Russia, France.
Yes.
And so this didn't happen, right, with the invasion?
I think after the collapse of Soviet Union, Americans felt they are the sole power in the world, so they don't need any UN anymore. So UN and everything was when there was a bipolar world, and the people or the countries needed to decide which side is right and which is not. So, but when there was no, I would say, another second superpower against the US hegemony, then there was no need for UN approval or amendment to do any action. And US felt at that time, after the invasion of Yugoslavia and this Bosnia and all those kind of stuff, that they really can do everything they want and no one can stop them. So obviously, then they planned this taking over of Iraq, because Iraq was second largest oil reserve, I would say, at the time. Maybe now it's not. Now there are more discoveries of oil reserves in the world. But at that time, Iraq was very important in terms of energy.
Mhm.
And so Afghanistan was like kind of a side effect of the plans for getting Iraq.
Which one was first, Iraq or Afghanistan? The first
Afghanistan was first.
Afghanistan was first. Okay.
So the whole attack, I would say, this 1911 attack, everything was fabricated in some sense. Even those guys from Saudi Arabia or some other Egypt or other countries which were taking part were either unintentionally or brainwashed or whatever by secret agencies of Saudi Arabia. Just they were framed to be part of this action. Everything was remotely controlled. So, but people may say this is this kind of conspiracy or whatever theory, but whatever. So Afghanistan just came like an obstacle to the plan. So should be taking, it was the easiest target for that at that time for the US military power and might. So they felt that Afghanistan could be something that they can just do it without any thinking.
So yeah, so when they came in, what sort of government they put together? How did they do it? Did they try to come up with like some election system, or what happened?
Then after this first ultimatums and all this kind of stuff, then of course Taliban rulers did not accept, and then they declared the war against Afghanistan, the US military. And then after 2 weeks of ultimatum, they asked them to hand over the Osama Bin Laden and accept all the terms. Taliban, of course, accept. They said, okay, we will give the Osama Bin Laden to third country, and under this kind of, it should be kind of be put in the court and should be a normal kind of process and so on. If he is guilty, he should be punished, whatever. America did not accept and invaded immediately. So it was 2 weeks after they, like end of September, they invaded Afghanistan. It took them like 3 weeks to capture the Kabul. Obviously, heavy bombardments of the entire land by bombarders and fighters. And then they kind of send their troops, these Marines and all those guys, to kind of take control of the land itself. And of course, they had then this Northern Alliance, so-called Northern Alliance fraction or group appeared. That was the like from the 3 parties, I guess. Jamiat Islami, I don't know, those other kind of stuff, and Jumbush Islami and Masood. So these guys announced that they will help US to overthrow Taliban. And then obviously,
why did they say that? Like those groups?
They didn't like Taliban because they were fighting Taliban during the Taliban government, and that part of the Kapisa and Panjshir, there was a region like a landlocked land or place in Afghanistan, which is very difficult to access. So that was controlled by Masood, Ahmad Shah Masood people, and he was resisting, and he was kind of not allowing Taliban to take the control entirely. The rest of the Afghanistan was taken by Taliban, but just this Panjshir. So kind of he was a hero resisting Taliban, and of course Americans then once they invaded, so they had this kind of, I would say, land troops for free. Those guys from this Northern Alliance, they helped the Americans to kind of push Taliban out. And then Dostum, Rashid Dostum, he was the Uzbek leader or the warlord. He started taking control of Mazar Sharif and Sheberghan in the north. And then he massacred almost 3,000 Taliban fighters in containers. So they locked them in the containers and burned the containers. So Americans, once they took over the Kunduz, the Taliban fighters surrounded, and then the American gave this to the Dostum, and Dostum burned them alive. Well, almost 3,000 Taliban fighters. That was really very cruel. And then, Dostum, the guy who was in the government even a week before, and so on. So most of them were really, really high-grade killers and murderers. But again, so that was
Americans, like, they knew that these people are like that, those groups.
Of course.
So
Americans had very strong intelligence, so they knew everything. They knew them. They knew how they killed, how they slaughtered and massacred the entire Kabul in 92. They knew everything. But for Americans, they did not care about what happened to Taliban or to others. For them, gaining the power in Afghanistan was important. So they took the power in Kabul, and then there was a kind of a Bonn conference in Germany. They called it Bonn, in the city of Bonn in Germany. There was a conference, a peace, so-called peace talk. And all these groups were kind of invited, and intellectuals and all people from like Afghans around the world to take a part and so on. So they wanted to decide what kind of government will be like this. So of course, the most influential part was this fighting group, these Mujahideen. So they said what kind of government they want, and US asked the Karzai, the former president, to come from US, and he was a US citizen. He was having his restaurant in US, in Pennsylvania, and so on. So he was a kind of a normal US citizen, nothing, no influential person, nothing more. First, US wanted his brother, his bigger brother, to become kind of a ruler, but he got killed in one part of Afghanistan by some groups. So then they asked his brother, his smaller, younger brother, like Hamid Karzai, to come to Afghanistan to become a president. He was from the Ahmadzai family, like kind of influential Pashtun family from the south, from Kandahar city. It was like a history in Afghanistan. There were 3 or 4 families that were always had rulers in Afghanistan, something like that. So they chose him to become a president. So he was like for several years without no election as president.
But he was just he didn't have any experience. He was just a normal person in the US.
Normal, usual person like me and you. We had only a restaurant, a pizza shop in US and Pennsylvania. They just asked him to come and become a president.
That's strange. Okay.
Yeah, of course, but that was not for him. It was not a difficult job to do, because obviously he did nothing. Everything was done by Americans. So it's like he was like just an icon, a symbol. So for a couple of years, then it was like an election, of course, largely fake. And again, Ahmed Karzai won the election for another 5 years. So then another election after this for another 5 years. So for almost 12 or 13 years, he was a kind of a president, so-called president. But during his presidency, corruption raised from nowhere to hundreds of thousands of persons. Like that was everyone, every single officer, every person, every traffic police, everyone was asking a bribe if he was doing some service to someone. Almost corruption everywhere.
Was it because
if you wanted to pay your electricity bill, you had to pay someone money that they will not ask you double money for the bill. It was like crazy corruption. I could not imagine how these people invented this type of corruption.
Why do you think this corruption happened, this large scale corruption? Was it because I've heard, like, for example, in the US, like military base, like a can of Pepsi or something was like $100. And then a Pepsi outside, like in some Afghan city, was like, I don't know, a few cents. So there was this big problem, like this, also in the bases, actually, like a lot of money was being spent on services. And like people were making a lot of money, but also spending a lot of money to put them back to the US, basically. But why did the corruption happen in like Afghanistan locally?
Logical reason for corruption is if you have lots of money and if you don't distribute the money evenly on a right way. So first of all, the US military and the US government was a huge machinery of corruption in the US itself. It was like a money laundering machine. US budget, like military budget, couple of hundreds of billions of dollars every year, was a huge amount, and they kind of always put aside like 100, 200 billion just for fighting in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and this kind of stuff. So it was a huge money. So it, like, I can tell you stories about it, like could not even imagine, like cases like crazy, like one, I don't know, one bulb, like light bulb, cost $200, like just because they changed the bulb. And they invoiced that to the government, but the US guys themselves, not Afghani government. Of course, it was like a US agencies, US military, whatever.
Subcontractors, yeah.
Subcontractors, paramilitary groups, everything. They fake hundreds, thousands of fake projects. Like they are building this, they are doing this, they are training soldiers, they are doing thousands of projects, fake projects. They once it was something really crazy. They spent $900 million on a huge military complex, and there was desert, there was nothing. After 3 years, they discovered there was nothing when the kind of controllers came to check it and see what's happening. So like this kind of crazy stuff. And of course, everything on account of Afghanistan. So they just took the money that we do this, we do that. We built roads, we built power lines, we built this and that, offices for government, I don't know. And then the money just turned back to whatever, to Hawaii, to this island, to, I don't know, tax-free islands everywhere. And they turned back, so never came to Afghanistan. The money. So billions and hundreds of billions came in, just moved back, never seen Afghanistan. And they had a lot of expenses. For example, one US officer or whatever worker, imagine UN workers, aid workers, helping people. They had expenses, monthly expenses, $50,000 to $60,000, a single person. Can imagine what he could do in that land for $50,000, $60,000. He just received, it was a UN budget, it's not US, it's UN. The guy received $15,000 to $20,000 his salary a month. Another $15,000 for his bodyguards, so $20,000 for bodyguards. Another like $10,000 to $15,000 for other expenses, like car and this monthly.
That's crazy.
That was corruption.
Yeah.
And our people never seen such a huge amount of money in their lives, even in their dreams, in the best dream, they never seen this. So once they saw, of course, they wanted to silence the Afghani people. So they stole, I don't know, 100, they give the Afghanis $2 just to keep silent. And the Afghani just signed the paper. Yes, we received the building, we received the power line, we received this. And this way they spread corruption in the entire country.
Yeah, that sounds similar to like when Slovakia became independent and we had like a lot of
But Afghanistan was
communism.
way, maybe
I
100
know, I know.
times
But like
worse.
similar mindset. I understand this mindset sometimes of people.
Yeah,
Uh,
kind of tunneling,
mhm,
the
right.
best way I would say. Of course, this then the corruption, and of course, when the US started withdrawing their soldiers, like back during the Obama,
Mhm,
the second Obama time, I would say the presidency, they started withdrawing their money, their soldiers and from Afghanistan. So they did not pump so much money. They knew that the money is disappearing. There is no Afghanistan. Money is not going to Afghanistan at all. So they stopped this money. And some portion of that money, even flowing to Afghanistan, also stopped.
mhm,
And that was bad for the government. Immediately, there was all the government projects stopped working. Huge unemployment started rising in Afghanistan. People had no food to eat. There was fight. Taliban was fighting everywhere, so there was no chance to grow agricultural products to just have a business and work. Almost everyone was fighting, and on the other side, there was a huge corruption. Every judge,
mhm.
every uh, police officer, every public officer, everyone was corrupt. Everyone. You could kill 5 people in front of the eyes in during the day in the street, and you were taken to the kind of by police to the court, and after 3 days you were free. You were seen again in the same street. And this type of cases was on a daily basis. Raping, attacking, killing, robbery, everything. And then people started, everyone had guns, weapons at home. So people started using that, killing each other everywhere. There was no police, no investigation.
So this is during like US government, not the US government, the Afghan government, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is because people may be listening like, no, this is Taliban. No, this is actually like the Afghan government before Taliban. So
yes.
at this
That
stage,
was
Taliban
that was the
actually,
last. Sorry.
I was just curious, Taliban was small at this time, like
No. Taliban was always big Taliban. I
okay.
mean, they had always their strong, I would say, support, and there's like a kind of, I would say, constant amount of supporters. They maybe the last year months they started having support from the all over country
Mhm.
because people were fed up with everything. There was enough. People said enough. But the last 10 to 12 years, the corruption was raising so much. There was no order, there was no system. You could not ask for justice. There was no justice at all.
Yeah, I've
And
heard
those
people actually went to Taliban courts to get like some
exactly
stuff.
that I wanted to mention. So Taliban said in the places where Taliban had more influence, then people came to Taliban and said, hey, I have a dispute with this, I have this problem, he got my money and he has this and that. So Taliban started kind of doing even the justice system they set up. And then the Taliban started protecting people from those warlords and so on. So that was the reason why they gained so much power and so much support. And the government, especially in Kabul, all these members of the parliament, they were like swimming in millions of dollars of money, corrupted money. Every member of parliament had houses like palaces, not one single, couple of them.
Mm.
Every minister in the government, they just have stolen like maybe hundreds of millions just from the projects and fled. Went back to Germany, went back to US, went back to Canada, and they could not bring back to justice. And the money was gone. So Afghanistan was drained out of the money because those government people just stole the money and drained it. And then this president, Ashraf Ghani, he was a kind of a pragmatic person. he was not religious so much in my eyes, but he was very patriotic and pragmatic. He was a US citizen as well. But he said, okay, even if you steal money, you need to do something in Afghanistan. You cannot just leave the people dying and just thinking of your family and of your children and yourself. You have to do something. And ask those guys. Of course, these guys didn't like him so much because he started throwing them away from the offices, from the ministries, from all this. So he became very unpopular among these mujahideens. He became a kind of an enemy number one for them. And of course, all they said, yeah, he's the US, he's kafir, he's US puppet, and this and that, and we've done this jihad, and he has done nothing, and now he dictates how it should be, and all this kind of stuff. But in fact, those like Atta Muhammad, Dostum, this Abdullah, I don't know, others, all of them are billionaires. They have several $1 billion each of them, properties, accounts in Dubai, in the US, in other countries, even in Europe, in Western Europe.
Mm-hmm.
They are protected actually by those. And so Ashraf Ghani started these infrastructure projects quite a lot. I think that was very positive from him. Started building up some dams. He said, because we have these droughts, we have a lot of water. On the other hand, we need to stop this water and use it for cultivating the land and agriculture.
Yeah.
Then build up a lot of infrastructure in terms of dams and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, so he had also his mistakes and issues and so on.
And so the people who worked with the government, this Afghan government, like translate, or people who helped US Army, like translators, or people who were, like locals
in the military bases, they worked.
Yeah, like they worked for them, they cooked or something. Of course, now we see the images of like when there's a plane and there's a lot of people who want to leave. So what do you think about this? How many people actually worked with the government or are kind of tied into, working with for the former Afghan government?
Officially, I mean, almost everybody worked for the government. The people had to somehow make some money, even from bribery, from, clean business or whatever, just getting salary, working in some office. But this group of people, like individuals who worked on the field for US military, directly in the field, like US military made some raid, going somewhere to do some, I don't know, some action. They took some Afghans with themselves just to translate, ask people, hey, have you seen this and that, and so on, where is this and where is it that? So like this, they needed these translators. And of course, they had a lot of people in the bases. They were doing cleaning job, they were doing cooking for them, a lot of other needed stuff like construction, building for them houses and so on. So there were a lot of people and drivers driving their cars, like moving around, like not just military, but also the officers. The US embassy had huge stuff in Afghanistan, like more than a couple of thousand. All of them had these private drivers and all this kind of stuff. So they had at least every staff member had 2-3 Afghani workers for them. So if overall it comes to many people, like if you put them together, it's like more than 50,000 people working for NATO, for US, military and US embassy and so on, and also paramilitary stuff. Then they had this kind of so-called secret paramilitary. US had a huge amount of paramilitary stuff, like I would say, how to call it, private military groups in Afghanistan. They were doing like kind of a dirty job for the US military. Like they were going overnight, killing people, slaughtering this village, and coming back, and they were trained very well, had support from the air by US drones. If someone attacked them or fired at them, then the drones just hit them from the air. And they were doing this dirty job on the ground. Many people died because of this US private.
So they were like during, let's say there was like a potential terrorist, so they killed the whole village. Or
Blackwater stuff,
yeah.
like, Blackwater and all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
Those guys. They had their own Afghans, like trained their own Afghans that they are doing like kind of, these Afghans doing then later on this job for them, like, punishing, hitting, killing, whatever, covering up, cleaning after them.
Yeah. So basically, US like trained also like Afghan
torturing.
government. Right. So they trained military for Afghan military as well, and they thought like these people, we can hand them power once we leave or something. But what happened in the recent weeks? Basically, the US withdrew, but Taliban was very fast to take over all the territory. Maybe we can talk about this. Like, what do you think?
In reality, Taliban just was invited by people to come. If you look at that, it was opposite. People were asking Taliban, "Hey, please come," and the fastest you can, please do that.
Like locals or like government?
Yeah, mostly locals, or I would say Afghanistan is a very tribal system. I mean, it's not like individuals, it's more about tribes and families that can say and can make the decision. So this, I would say these people from the hierarchy of the tribes, they just making their own. It's kind of a type of a special rules in the rural parts of Afghanistan, that the people live under that rules, and these bosses, I would say, or these leaders are doing the decision what to do and what not to. So they just say, okay, they sit together and say, yes, this is for our benefit. We want to have justice. We don't want to have government. We don't want to have these soldiers anymore. We don't want to have these judges. We don't want to have these offices, everything. We want to just throw them away. They just asked Taliban, hey, please don't fight, just take it. And they went and convinced this Afghan military, I would say, local, I would say spots, or the commando groups, or whatever we call it, like chatas, that, hey, please don't fight. Just give away your weapon.
And they will not kill them? Or
surrender.
Okay.
Yeah. Just don't fight. We don't want you to fight just for the sake of US or Afghan government. So, of course, they convinced everybody that to have Taliban is better for us than to have this so-called democratic government. There was no benefit from that government at all. There was no benefit, except for some projects, aid projects that coming from US, Europe, and this, that they were building some roads and this kind of doing some humanitarian. There was no other benefit of this government for people.
So,
but the people in Kabul say opposite. They say, yeah, we have more freedom. We can do whatever. We can listen to any music. We can watch any movie. We can drink beer. No one says why you should drink. There was a lot of other stuff which is against Islam, which should not be. And some people are very sensitive to that. And, like adultery was spread so much in Kabul. And beside the corruption and beside of no justice. So, of course, But the people in Kabul, some intellectual part. Kabul is a huge city, large city. It's like 5 to 6 million people living in Kabul.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe 50,000 or 100,000 people, which were fed from the money from the US support or Europe or whatever, or so-called from this democratic liberal government. So they were kind of attached to that system. That was beneficial for them to keep this government ruling, because, and on the other side, this young generation, they had no touch with this previous, situation in Afghanistan. So they had this mobile phone, access computer, internet, everything. They had different ideas, different feeling. They said, why should I change this if I have all this access?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of.
So do you believe there was like a problem because there was like a minority of people who wanted to leave Afghanistan if this happens, because they will lose their freedom, let's say, in some ways, and the other majority was on board with Taliban? Like,
yes. Of course, they would lose all these benefits, the advantages they had. So,
mm-hmm.
And obviously, we have a huge community of Afghans around the world, especially Europe, US, Canada, Australia, and all those countries, except Iran, Pakistan, and these Muslim countries. I mean, non-Muslim countries. Those people are really against the ruling of Taliban, so the huge resistance against Taliban now, if you see in social media, is coming all from those people, because they say, of course, they claim Taliban are the barbaric groups, and their all times was so barbaric, and we don't forget this, and all this kind of stuff. And then they say Taliban will never change and they will be the same, but just they are faking it. They are just playing with us. But these people, and there is also a minority in these countries that they want really to end with war in Afghanistan, and they want really bring peace and prosperity and finishing all this corruption. So.
Mm-hmm. But so, like, okay, you just described everything in a context, but many people in the West, so this is how they think. Everybody who I talked to about this. So we want to give them freedom and they don't want it. So why is it? Why is it failing? These people are backwards. They don't want this freedom. Like, so can you, because that's also the argument, every sort of argument for the invasion is based on some emotion, like women's rights or whatever. People don't have freedom of press and we need to give it to them. But like, so what do you think about this whole freedom thing? Is that why is it what's the reason that none of the invasions worked in Afghanistan in your experience? Or I don't know if you have any thoughts.
It's a matter of perspective. I mean, point of view. People in Europe see the freedom in a different way, in different point of view. For them, is a personal freedom. They can do whatever they like, they please to do. In our society, we are, even in entire Asia, it's not even Islamic, and even you go to China, you go to Asia, to Japan, to Korea, to these countries, which are even more liberal, I would say. They have their own culture. In their culture, freedom means a totally different thing. In an Islamic system, freedom means that you are free under the umbrella of Islam, which means if the freedom is about learning, if the freedom is about making money, if the freedom is a way of living, having a good house or property, if the freedom is about enjoying the life, Islam says nothing against. You can do that. But if the freedom is about crossing the Islamic lines, in terms of nudity, in terms of adultery, alcohol, whatever is banned in Islam, there is no freedom allowed in Islam. There is no freedom for that.
Yeah.
In Islam, it's called haram. And Sharia means Islamic rules or law. And Sharia means every ruler in Islamic land has the right to set up the Sharia system in the land that pleases the people, but never crosses the line, the red line of Islam, or the lines, the boundaries of Islam. And people in Europe do not understand what we want. They think that if they have freedom of drinking beer, we should have the same. I don't say in Afghanistan there are no individuals that they want to drink the beer. There are as well. But because the society, the whole setup is Islamic, if you do drink your beer at home, no one says it's up to you. But if you drink it in public, then people will not accept it.
Yeah.
And especially hijab of the women. In France, the women cannot wear the clothes other way than the government says. Muslim women in France cannot wear hijabs in public places, I would say, in official places. They cannot cover their head, so that's dictatorship as well. I mean, you're talking of freedom, so let her to be free to decide if she has a job or she wants to have it without. So, I mean, people in Europe or anywhere else that are against that Islamic thoughts, they need to first understand what Muslims want.
Yeah.
And then second, they need to accept what they want.
Right.
I mean, we are, yeah.
I was just curious, what do you think maybe in the past or now does Taliban has a correct interpretation of Sharia? Are they practicing it how it's supposed to be? The hudud laws,
yes,
or whatever?
My personal point of view is they are actually following the right Sharia. We were doing wrong Sharia all the time so far. It's not that I am backwarding. It's not I am against women's rights. It's not I am barbaric or wants to punish someone. No. If we are talking about Sharia, we have to say the truth. Sharia is Sharia. Sharia comes from teaching of our beloved Prophet, and it is clear what is allowed, what is not allowed, and how it should be. The system, how the whole ruling should be. Taliban's, I mean, all other systems we had previously in Afghanistan failed to kind of spread Sharia in Afghanistan. I'm not talking about other Islamic countries. It's not my job. I'm talking about Afghanistan at the moment. Regarding Afghanistan, we had no Sharia so far, except for maybe some short period, 5 years, the Taliban had, but that was really not very well practiced as well. It was very harsh for people and very cruel. But again, I must admit in front of the God, Allah, that you cannot cheat. That is the real Sharia. All other groups so far, they claim to be Muslim, Islamic, whatever they call themselves, they failed. They clearly failed to be real good Muslims. I mean, globally, I don't mean individually. There are a lot of individuals among them, a lot of good Muslims. But as a system, they failed. There was no Sharia, no Islamic ruling in Afghanistan at all. How you can call it Islamic ruling if you have, I would say, nightclubs in Kabul? How you call it if there is no, you can find alcohol anywhere you want? How you call it if there is adultery? Mixing men and females and males everywhere. That attracts adultery. Islamic ruling says clearly in the schools there is a separation. You cannot mix them up. I don't want to say anything about what the feeling of people in Europe. This is their way. How do they live? I do not want to force my way. But this is Islamic land, Afghanistan. This is Islamic, and that's the ruling. That is the Sharia how it's supposed to be. Women can go to school, can work, can make money, can choose to whom she wants to, with whom she wants to get married. I mean, can choose how she wants to, what kind of colors of clothes, what kind of food to eat, everything. It's her freedom in Islam. But she cannot, disclose her body, show up her body parts just to be attractive for someone. She cannot just go and, I don't know, do things which are not allowed. The same for men. It's not only for women. The same for men. Men cannot do things which may attract adultery or may end up un-Islamic.
Right. So some of the stuff that Taliban was doing like 20 years ago when they didn't allow women to go to school, this wasn't really the proper understanding, but they are changing now, or the some of the rulings now are more, let's say, no, I wouldn't say liberal, but they are more like more in line with the actual Sunnah. Yeah.
I mean, even that time it was not that bad as it is pictured now. It was not that harsh. I was in Afghanistan at that time. I traveled to Afghanistan. I mean, in terms of security, that was number one. You could not find anywhere in the world secure place. I mean, when I asked the Taliban, why are you doing this to the women? They say, well, Afghanistan is so much destroyed. So people are so much, after years of war, completely damaged that we cannot guarantee security for women. So we need to keep this stuff for several years until we bring some advancement here, build up something that the women can safely go out. But of course, because there's thousands, tens of thousands of women in Afghanistan had no man at home because of war, got killed, they had no replacement for that solution, for that decision. There was no solution for that. And so on. That was, I would say, not very wrong decision, but that was not very happy decision.
Yeah, but I've never heard the other coin, which you just said, that a lot of women were raped or harassed on the street.
Oh, yeah,
nobody says this, but they just say the other thing, like they were not allowed to go out. But why? Like there's always a reason.
I mean, that's a propaganda, of course. I mean, especially Western media and Western political, I would say, society, they need that propaganda to move forward their agenda. Having control, having power, everything. They need the propaganda is a tool to brainwash the people, to convince the people, yeah, what I'm doing is right because of this and that. You see how bad it is, so I need to fix it.
Yeah, I guess every system, yeah.
They cannot just go and do something and have no excuse for it. So they need to find excuse. And they will not tell the whole story. They will pick something. Even now, there are pictures from 25 years ago from the Taliban reign popping up, and they're saying, you see, Taliban is doing now. And we know this picture is from such and such time.
Yeah, I think basically every system tries to do this. Sometimes I see also like maybe some propaganda from Islamic point of view to West, like how it's all like everybody's gay here and stuff, but it's not really true. It's not like that. It's too overplayed. So this is like something people do all the time. They just want to protect their worldview or like spread their values, basically.
Exactly. The problem is it's a fear of something. And the best or the biggest fear of something is the fear of unknown.
Yeah.
If you don't know something, then you think the worst about that thing.
Yeah.
If you never seen Muslim or back, let's take this picture opposite. If you are in Islamic land, you've never seen a Christian in Europe. You see every Christian is I don't know, or every European is doing adultery. If you never seen a never lived in like a family or never seen a girl or women in European society, you see everyone is like a changing man, you know, like. But of course, I mean, there is a lot of propaganda everywhere. The thing is, this is the job of the rulers, politicians, the job of the media to teach the people the truth everywhere, not only in Europe, but also back in Islamic countries. The job of those who are in control that explain the truth. If you don't say the truth, in a small fake news may become a big issue later that you cannot fix it anymore.
Yeah, I think what people are afraid of here when they look at the situation, they think like that sort of Sharia that they practice in Afghanistan, they want to do it here in Czech Republic or in Slovakia. Like exactly the same thing is going to happen here, which is, I mean, this is not possible. It would be, it's not even possible to consider this because there's not even an Islamic government. First of all, not even enough Muslims to establish anything. And
I mean, I would be pleased if I say practicing Sharia, people are not drinking alcohol, people are not.
Well, there is Sharia some different from like family Sharia. You don't need from a government. You can have
yeah.
Sharia.
But it doesn't mean that I will enforce it. People to do what I have to do. Sometimes in Facebook or in other forums, people basically writing kind of writing down about those stuff like you are Muslims, you are bad people, and you're coming here and killing us, raping our women, and so on, and turning us to be Muslim, blah blah blah. Sometimes it's very hard to argument these people because those people have no rational reason or background for their arguments.
Yeah.
If you say, please show me a case, someone did it to you. I mean, it may happen, some criminal can do. You cannot turn it to entire society, entire people of that group.
Mm-hmm.
But these people have no argument. They just are pushing what they're saying. Yeah. I mean, the majority of society, I feel the people are very rational. They think. They say, yes, this is their way and this is our way. I mean, if I talk to a lot of people, not all of them are thinking as we discussed now, that like they are coming and with Sharia and doing it. They know because they see Muslims. They deal with them all the time. Mm-hmm. That no Muslim came and said, hey, you must be Muslim, otherwise I would kill you.
Well, it's against Quran, right? Like it doesn't make sense. Sharia only applies to Muslims. So like you can be a non-Muslim and live under Sharia and have your own court system, like in Spain and in historic Andalusia, which was ruled by Muslims for 800 years. They were a minority and the majority was Christian and Jewish, and they had their own system, but the Muslim ruler, and it was fine. So it wasn't applied to them. It was applied to Muslims, right?
And even they remember that history of Andalusia, like in best ways. They say it was the good time when they were Muslims here because there was a prosperity. No one says that under the Andalusia people were oppressed or people were tortured or I don't know what. Even this history is so much praised in.
I agree. So now the question is, what do you think what about those people in Afghanistan who want to drink beer and who want to have this freedom, but they now can't, and they want to leave? Like, do you think there's going to be a lot of refugees or, asylum seekers?
Well, I mean, that is a shock wave at the moment. That's not a real refugee wave, it's a shock wave. People still arguing that Taliban are cruel and are the same as 20 or 25 years ago and so on. So what they say is we cannot leave like that. So we have to flee the country. We have to get out of here. It's not about they want to drink alcohol. They want to, I don't know, practice adultery or whatever. Oh yeah, there are individuals who are afraid of their future because they have been doing so much bad, killing people and stealing from people, raping, attacking, because they had the power to do so. No one could stop them. Now they are afraid. It's not about being afraid of Taliban. Taliban said, pardon to everyone from our side, but not from the people's side. If you or someone was attacked by someone, and after, let's say, people are waiting like a month or 2 or 3 until the government is set up, everything is in place, then the people start popping up and asking, hey, this guy attacked me. He took my car. He never gave me back. He has my house. He kicked me out of my house and renamed the house into his name. Or he killed my brother, he killed my son, he killed my husband. Or he raped my daughter. I will not forgive him. You can forgive him because of you, both between you, but not between me and him. These people are afraid.
Do you think there's many of those, or?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
It's not. Now they are silent or silently want to flee the country. Either they are silent, they're keeping themselves low profiled, they do not show up themselves in the streets because they know the people know about them. So they are. Or they try, they find the fastest way how to flee to the airport. How to run to airport and sit in the crowd and wait for the airplane. And of course, scream, I don't want Taliban, because they are cruel, they are bad, and so on. And I want my human rights.
Yeah.
And he must do this. Otherwise, he cannot say, hey, I killed people, I want to flee. Yeah. That's not a way how you can convince Europeans or Americans to take you into the plane. Hey, I raped his daughter, now he wants his revenge, wants to bring me to justice. No, I want to go to Canada because I raped his daughter. He will not say so. So he will say, yes, my rights were violated. Yeah. Please help me.
Yeah. So do you think what the future is right now? So let's say Taliban has now the power. What do you think happens next year or in the recent years? Because it doesn't look like US wants to go back, or Europe, they just spent so much money there and nothing basically changed. So what do you think
there are several huge problems, that may turn out to be very bad for Afghanistan. First is that intellectual people, they can flee. Doctors, engineers, they can just join this group in the airport. I mean, good people, beneficial for the country, or because of the fear they have, or because of the propaganda. Western countries say, hey, come to us, you will have a good life. In Afghanistan, there is everything dark. Not because they are afraid of Taliban, but because they don't see perspectives there.
Yeah.
Or always European Commission, always US, all those guys say, hey, Afghanistan will be bad, will be hunger, will be bad, this and that. Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. So like Afghanistan will be bad, will be this, will be that. So they just spread rumors of bad future. So intellectuals, good people, they have never done anything wrong. They just did a good job. They can flee, and this is very bad because we need them in Afghanistan. We're not in Germany cleaning up toilets, not in US driving Uber taxi or delivery pizza. We want them to be in Afghanistan serving hospitals and schools and so on. And Taliban say the same. Every day they announce, please don't go. We just put you on the top of our eyes. Just please stay. Because we need you, not we. People need you. We cannot educate another doctor immediately. We need to wait another 5 to 7 years just to someone become a doctor. We need you. People need you. People are dying in hospitals. That's the problem. Second problem is, again, US, Europe are threatening to stop the money flow to Afghanistan. That is crime. That's a crime. They should be bring to justice these people from European governments and the US, even the chief of the European Commission. They should be bring to court and be jailed for that. They cannot say, hey, we will not give you back your money. Because you know what does it mean? All traders, all people will be afraid that businesses will be stopped, they will flee, and they will take their money out. There will be hunger and people will be dying.
And what money are you talking about?
They stopped, they froze Afghanistan. Afghanistan had $9.5 billion a monetary reserve in US or some other countries. They froze this money. They said there is no money allowed to go to Afghanistan. And also World Bank and all those, they had these lines of credit for Afghanistan because of this money was important because Afghanistan was buying some goods, selling some goods because of the trades, and the people needed that money to keep alive. And they stopped all those money. So all accounts, Afghan National Bank and Afghan banks have outside of Afghanistan are frozen now, mostly frozen.
Right. Yeah, that's a big problem.
That's a crime. That's not a problem. That's a crime. They should be punished for that. And they don't say this aloud, but they do that. And people don't know that. The third problem is they are just pumping in the heads of these former criminals or the people in the former government, like these warlords, that you are fighting for your freedom. We will help you. Taliban are bad, they are backwarding. You must free your land, your flag, your family, your city, blah, blah, blah. They give them this hope that if they will start fighting, they will receive support like during the Russian invasion, Soviet invasion. So that is a huge problem, especially Macron, the French president, is doing this. It may happen that there will be a civil war. People do not need war. They have enough. 43 years of war, enough.
Yeah. I've heard, I saw on YouTube actually the clip of the same speech just to Taliban in the 90s. Like the same thing, like these people took your land, go there by the CIA agent. Like it's on YouTube, you can watch it. It's the same speech just to Taliban. And now they do the same speech to the other side.
I know it, and I don't need to watch these videos because I know it from life experience. I know it, how it happened. How was the brainwashing done in Afghanistan? And now they are doing the same business, the same job. So our people without money, without intellectuals, without people with bright brains, without peace, can only die.
What about Muslim countries? Like, can they help or not really?
The problem is most of the Muslim countries are puppets. They cannot control over themselves. Their bank assets are under the US Treasury control. They have no free money that they can just give it to someone just without allowance from US.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about Gulf countries or no matter what. Then you have countries which are afraid if they do something, if they help or support, they will be kind of accused of helping terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a big issue. So, I mean, nowadays, the world banking system, the world monetary system is all under the control of influential people and the governments, and they dictate how the rules should be and so on. That's the problem. Now, if they do that, they have to do it kind of in a secret way, but they cannot make a huge support because that will be uncovered.
Yeah.
And they will be accused of helping terrorism or whatever.
Yeah. I guess the only ones with the money could help are China, but because the US is kind of not
they
gonna
are not
block
afraid
them.
of US, exactly.
But China is not ideal partner. I mean, it's as bad as it can.
Hard to say. So far, they didn't do any bad to us. Maybe it's just a future thinking of how they will turn out to be bad. But
not to Afghanistan,
now,
but like as a let's say a power in the politics. It's also has many problems.
Yeah, they run their own agenda, of course.
Yeah. They even like with the Uyghur minority, you know, they're killing Muslims, so
yes,
it's not really great.
Well, killing Muslims are doing it in Egypt as well. Killing Muslims are doing also in Yemen, Saudi Arabians. They're killing Muslims. They're not killing non-Muslims. They're killing Muslims. Killing Muslims are doing also Emirates, United Arab Emirates. They are killing Muslims in Libya and in Yemen as well. Muslims are killed in Libya. Muslims are killed in Syria. Muslims are killed in Iraq. Muslims are killed in Afghanistan. They are not necessarily being China. You know, Muslims are being killed in India, in Kashmir.
Yeah.
Muslims are being killed many and many other places in the world, in Africa, even in Western countries. No one is kind of taken accountable for that. China, I mean, this dispute, or I mean, this atrocities they do against Muslim Uyghur Muslims in west part of China, that's kind of a blessing for Western countries to gain support and popularity from Islamic lands. It's just pumping this message everywhere toward that. Look what China is doing. But comparing that China has killed Uyghurs, maybe 1 or 2 million, to US that killed many tens of millions of Muslims, it is not comparable even.
How many people do you think died in Afghanistan during the US government or the previous?
I mean, during the US invasion, officially maybe 250, 280,000 Afghans died, but unofficially I would say maybe double or triple. Because they never count, they always say collateral damage or something. They kill 50 people, they call it, they killed 50 Talibans. Or they call it, we killed 48 Talibans and 2 civilians. And we are sorry for these 2 civilians. In reality, there was 2 Talibans and 48 civilians.
Right.
They don't count these people.
Do you ever plan to go back to visit or in the near future?
Definitely, I will go. I will definitely go. I'm just waiting for normalizing the situation now in Afghanistan because we don't know what may possibly happen if there is like a fighting starts or whatever, because this other groups will start Taliban and so on, fighting Taliban. But I hope, because I have my families back there. I love my country. I love, even I'm more eager to go now because I can really feel I'm in a real Islamic land. Before I went travel to Afghanistan, I had a mixed feeling. I had a feeling that I am not anymore in an Islamic land.
Yeah. Is your family in Slovakia like half Slovak Afghan, or do you have like your family here? Or?
No, I have my wife is Slovak. She's from Slovakia.
Okay, got it.
Mixed family.
Yeah. So I just maybe as an end, I wish people had sort of like my experience, maybe who are non-Muslims, because I went through the stage of being a Christian for 15 years, then being atheist for 10, and now being Muslim. And it's like, if people had all these perspectives in them, it would really change everything, because what do you think is freedom is different. And now what I think is freedom as a Muslim is completely different. I think freedom is being free from your own desires and from, all these things of this world, but also, of course, living here. I'm not saying it's like haram to live in the real world, but you have a different set of values, and like everybody has a different definition of freedom, and this is the core of the conflict. It's the ideological, philosophical, like underpinning, people misunderstanding what actually who has what values, and they think like these people want to take over these people. And it's just hopefully people will at some point get the chance, maybe in Slovakia also, through some of the dawah or something like that, to get to know like some basics of Islam, and just figure out what's the truth. And it's up to them to decide what they want to do. But yeah, I guess.
I mean, part of the dawah is we have to tell the people the truth, that, hey, what is expected from you and what will you expect in the hereafter. Of course, it's their own choice. It's their own freedom to choose to go that way or another way. But if they take this way, they choose this way, it's only for their benefit. It's not about restricting themselves from, I don't know, doing this and that. As you said exactly, you very nicely defined what is the freedom. Freedom is freedom from your own desires that only corrupts you.
Because I lived it, so I can talk to anyone who I want, because I've done all the things you can imagine. So I know there's no freedom in any of that, whether it's drugs or whatever you want to picture about. So that's why I think I have this perspective, which can be really powerful, because what can you tell me? Like, what, I want to go back? I already did that. Like, there's nothing there. There's nothing. It's just nice outside, but empty inside. So it's simple as that. Yeah. But yeah, people have it as essentially Allah shows, like Allah guides, not us. You can just share a message and that's it, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. So Jazakallah khair for being here and sharing this story and this view on what's going on in Afghanistan now. I think we've learned a lot. I'm pretty sure people will have some questions maybe. So put them in the comments and we'll try to respond. And hopefully we'll get a chance to, catch up maybe in the future and speak and meet even in the real physical, world.
Inshallah. Thank you too. And I wish you blessed life, blessed night, day. Thank you. And hopefully we will see each other in person and we will talk about a lot of other stuff as well.
Yeah, inshallah. So thank you and assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.